Sometimes what we call procrastination is actually friction. We live in a culture that worships motivation, but motivation is unreliable. It shows up when conditions are perfect and disappears the moment they aren't. And most of life, especially the middle chapters of life, are not perfect. What does matter and what doesn't get nearly enough attention are systems, the expectations we carry, the structures we've inherited or created. Systems don't require you to feel inspired, they just require you to step into them. And when a system no longer fits you, friction shows up. That friction often gets mislabeled as procrastination. Hello, welcome to the Shattered Mindset Podcast, wisdom from life's turning points and defining moments. I'm your host, Melvin Larry, and I want to start today by challenging a word that gets thrown around way too casually. That word is procrastination, because most people don't procrastinate because they're lazy. They procrastinate because something inside them is out of alignment. And when that happens, we tend to do something that quietly does more damage than we realize. We start labeling ourselves. I'm just not motivated. I must be lazy. I don't have the discipline. I used to have this. But here's the thing, and this matters. Most of the people listening to this episode are capable people. You've built things, you've raised families, you've shown up under pressure, you've handled responsibility. So if you're suddenly feeling stuck or delayed or hesitant, that's not a character flaw, that's a signal. And today, I want to talk about what that signal is really pointing to. See, sometimes what we call procrastination is actually friction. We live in a culture that worships motivation, motivational speeches, motivational quotes, motivational bursts of energy. But motivation is unreliable. It shows up when conditions are perfect and disappears the moment they aren't. And most of life, especially the middle chapters of life, are not perfect. What does matter and what doesn't get nearly enough attention are systems, the environments we operate in, the expectations we carry, the structures we've inherited or created. Because systems don't require you to feel inspired, they just require you to step into them. And when a system no longer fits you, who you are or who you're becoming, friction shows up. That friction often gets mislabeled as procrastination. Here's the question I want you to sit with. What if procrastination isn't avoidance of work, but avoidance of discomfort? Discomfort with uncertainty, discomfort with change, discomfort with not being as clear as you think you should be by now. And that's especially true for people who have a strong sense of responsibility, people who don't want to move recklessly, people who care about getting it right. But waiting for clarity before moving is one of the most common traps I see, because clarity doesn't usually precede action, clarity follows it. So, why does small movement matter more than big intention? There's an old idea that's been around far longer than social media productivity posts ever will. It's the idea that small, consistent movement beats intensity. Not because big moves are bad, but because big moves feel expensive. They require certainty. They require confidence. They require conditions to line up. Small movement is different. Small movement is negotiable. One step, one adjustment. Look, not because it's impressive, but because it's possible. And when movement becomes possible, momentum has a chance to breathe. This is where many people get tripped up. They don't need a new goal, they need less resistance at the starting line. Okay, for example, imagine someone who's always been the planner. They think things through carefully. They don't rush decisions. They like to understand the landscape before they move. That approach has really served them well for years, but now they're facing a decision that doesn't come with clear data. Maybe it's a personal transition. Maybe it's a shift in relationship. Maybe it's a creative idea. Really, an idea that doesn't have an obvious outcome. They start delaying, not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Every time they consider taking a step, another question shows up, another what if, another angle to evaluate. And after a while, they start saying things like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't seem to get started. But what's really happening isn't procrastination, it's that their usual strength, planning, has quietly turned into a barrier. Once they give themselves permission to take small, low risk step, not a decision, just movement, something shifts. Clarity doesn't arrive all at once, but it arrives enough. Not because everything became certain, but because motion replaced overthinking. Another reason procrastination shows up is because people lose sight of why they're moving in the first place. Not passion, not hype, purpose. And purpose doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet dissatisfaction, a sense that what once made sense no longer does. You see, when people say they're unmotivated, what they're often saying is this: I don't see the point anymore. That's not laziness, that's misalignment. Purpose isn't always about something new. Sometimes it's about seeing your current season differently. Why get up? Why show up? Why keep going? When that question goes unanswered, though, effort feels heavy. But when that question gets even partially answered, effort feels lighter. Not easier, but lighter. And what about the quiet enemy nobody talks about? Overload. Let me say something that might surprise you. Sometimes the reason you feel stuck isn't because you're doing too little, it's because you're consuming too much. Too much information, too many opinions, too many responsibilities that no longer fit, too many expectations, some of them self imposed. Now, mental clutter actually creates noise, and noise makes signals harder to hear. When everything matters, nothing moves. And eventually, the mind does the only thing it can do to protect itself: it slows down. Then we label that slowdown as procrastination, but it's really overload. See, your brain responds to signals, not speeches. This is where systems outperform motivation. Your brain is constantly asking one question: is it safe and worth it to engage right now? Now, rituals help answer that question. Not grand rituals, simple ones, a consistent starting point, a familiar cue, a moment that tells your brain, we've been here before, you can focus now. That's why time based techniques work, not because of the clock, but because they create predictability. Predictability reduces resistance, and reduced resistance leads to action. Not heroic action, just enough action to get started. And then environment, well, it shapes behavior more than intention ever will. We like to believe that we operate independently of our environment. Well, we don't. Our surroundings constantly whisper instructions. Clutter whispers distraction. Chaos whispers urgency. Old reminders whisper old identities. Sometimes the reason we're tired isn't because life is hard, it's because we're still maintaining versions of ourselves that no longer exist, roles we've outgrown, expectations that no longer apply, commitments that once fit but now constrict. Clearing space isn't just about organizing rooms, it's about deciding what no longer deserves your energy. Here's another example. Picture someone who's juggling a lot: family, responsibilities, professional commitments, community involvement. Those are the reliable ones. You're the reliable one, and you're the person that count on. You're the go-to person, and you probably been that person that everybody at work comes to, everybody in the family comes to. I know how that feels. And over time, though, you take on more, not because you're forced to, but because you're capable. And eventually, something interesting happens. You start feeling tired in a way that rest doesn't fix. Tasks you used to handle easily now feel heavier. Projects get delayed. Decisions get postponed. From the outside, it looks like procrastination. From the inside, it feels like fog. What changes things isn't productivity. It's the moment you step back and ask, which of these am I still carrying because they once fit, but they don't anymore? When you remove just one unnecessary commitment, when you simplify your environment, when you stop trying to be everything to everybody, energy starts to return. Not because life got easier, but because alignment replaced overload. And guess what? You don't have to be perfect. Hey, perfection is just fear with better branding. Let me talk about that. One of the most common forms of procrastination I see, especially among thoughtful, capable people, is perfectionism. It's not arrogance, maybe it's fear. Fear of getting it wrong, fear of being misunderstood, fear of moving before things feel solid. But here's the truth: completion builds momentum, perfection builds delay. Finishing something imperfectly at least gives you something to work with, but waiting for perfect often gives you nothing at all. Adjustment comes after movement, not before it. Movement creates clarity, not the other way around. This might be the most important thing I say today. Most people don't need more patience, they need permission. Permission to move without certainty, permission to act without full clarity, permission to trust that insight often arrives after engagement. Procrastination thrives when movement feels unsafe. So, what makes movement feel manageable? Systems. Let me say this clearly. If you've been calling yourself lazy, if you've been questioning your discipline, if you've been wondering what's wrong with you, like I have sometimes, take a pause. There may be nothing wrong with you at all. You might simply be operating inside systems that were built for who you used to be, not who you're becoming. And when systems and identity fall out of sync, friction shows up, not as failure, as feedback. Here's the reframe I want to leave with you: procrastination isn't the enemy, it's information. It's telling you to look not at your character, but at your structure, you know, at your environment, at the things and the way you're trying to move forward. And once you stop shaming yourself and start listening, something shifts, because systems don't eliminate fear, they carry you through it. So listen, I'm done here. And until the next time, keep adapting, keep evolving, and keep reaching for those new horizons. I'll see you the next time on the Shattered Mindset podcast. Take care, take charge, and God bless.